Samantha, 29. There are betrayals that wound you deeply, like a knife to the back. And then there are betrayals that make you question your very sanity, that make you wonder if the people you once called family ever really saw you as human. My brother's decision to use me as a pawn in his chaotic life was one of those. This is the story of how I ended up nearly arrested for child endangerment, because my brother left his children outside my house while I was at a party out of town, without telling me, without warning, without even the decency of a phone call. It started on a Friday. I was in Savannah, Georgia, at a friend's birthday party. I had taken the whole weekend off. I needed it. I was working double shifts at a local gallery downtown, trying to build a portfolio and prepping for my own small show next month. My friends and I had rented a place just outside the city in Tybee Island. The ocean breeze, the clinking of glasses, the laughter echoing through the halls. It felt like freedom. I danced until 2 a.m., slept in until almost noon, and took a slow walk along the beach before driving back home to Macon early Saturday morning. I felt rejuvenated. I had no clue what storm was waiting for me. When I got back, everything looked normal. My porch was empty, my plants were still alive, my mailbox was full, as usual. I took a shower, made coffee, and sat on the couch scrolling through photos from the party. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there he was, James, my older brother, looking like he had just run a marathon and was late to a second one. He acted casual. He smiled, asked how I was, made some comment about my hair, and then said he needed to get going quickly and asked if I could bring out the kids. I blinked. I thought I misunderstood him. I asked what kids he was talking about. He looked confused, then annoyed, then actually offended. He told me he had left his kids at my house yesterday afternoon, around 4, because he had to handle something in Atlanta and thought I would see them and take them in. I just stared at him. I told him I was out of town the entire weekend. He looked like I had just slapped him. I asked him again, where exactly did he leave them? He pointed vaguely toward my front steps. He had left his 2 small children, aged 4 and 6, outside my house on the porch, unsupervised, without telling a single soul. I felt my stomach drop. I started yelling. I told him I was gone, I had not been home, that there were no children here when I got back. He began to panic, his face twisted into anger, and then he started shouting at me, claiming I was lying, that I had always been jealous of him, that I wanted to punish him by doing something to his kids. I was in total disbelief. I told him to stop, and I went straight inside and grabbed my phone. I called the police and reported that 2 minors were missing and had potentially been abandoned outside my home. The dispatcher asked me a dozen questions. I could barely breathe, but I explained the whole thing. They said a patrol car would be dispatched immediately. 15 minutes later, 2 officers pulled into my driveway. One got out and walked up the steps while the other stayed by the car, talking on the radio. I started to explain the situation, but before I could finish 2 sentences, James jumped in and began weaving a story that nearly made my head explode. He told them that I had agreed to watch the kids, that I had taken them in, and now I was claiming they had never been here. He even started fake crying, saying I must have lost them or taken them somewhere and was trying to cover it up. The officers looked at each other. One of them gently asked me to come with him to the car. I started screaming, demanding that they not touch me, that he was lying, but they said I needed to calm down and that they just wanted to clarify some things at the station. My hands were shaking. I could not believe what was happening. I told them to wait. I was calling a lawyer. I dialed a friend who had gone to law school with me. I never thought I would need her help like this, but I gave her the short version, and she said she would meet me at the station immediately. At that point, the officers backed off a bit, but I was still escorted to the station. My brother stood on my front lawn, pretending to cry, holding a crumpled photo of his kids like he was the victim in all this. I sat in that small, dim room at the station with fluorescent lights buzzing above me and the taste of bile in my throat. The officer interviewing me finally listened to my story and called the dispatcher to verify the original call. They confirmed I had reported the children missing before any accusation had been made. That helped, but they still needed to investigate. My lawyer showed up and insisted on reviewing the security camera footage from nearby homes. I had no cameras on my house, but one of my neighbors did. That neighbor saved my life. The footage clearly showed no children were left at my house that Friday evening. No one came up the steps. No kids were ever dropped off. My brother's car never appeared. Nothing. It was all a lie. He had fabricated the entire story. I walked out of that police station with my lawyer at my side, seething. James was brought in later that night. When confronted with the footage, he backpedaled. He claimed he must have remembered wrong, that he left them at another house and got confused. But it was too late. He was charged with filing a false police report and endangering minors. The Department of Child and Family Services was involved immediately. His ex-wife, who had primary custody, was livid and moved to cut off all visitation rights. I offered the footage, the call logs, and the police reports. James had tried to destroy my life out of laziness, out of cowardice, and when it failed, he nearly dragged me down with him. I never expected my own brother to be capable of something so insidious. I never expected to see that look in his eyes, the one that says you are disposable, convenient, a scapegoat for someone else's recklessness. But now I know. Family does not always mean loyalty. Blood does not always mean love. And I will never, ever leave my front door unguarded again. Update 1. The chair in the police station felt colder the longer I sat in it. I had been questioned 3 separate times by 2 different officers, and each round felt more like an interrogation than the last. I kept telling them the same thing. I had not seen the children. I had not been home. I had been in Tybee Island for a party with friends, and I had just returned that morning to find nothing on my porch, no bags, no toys, no signs of children at all. But their eyes betrayed their doubts. They nodded while scribbling in notebooks. They exchanged glances over my shoulder, and the room reeked of quiet suspicion. At one point, a younger officer came in holding a tablet and whispered something to the sergeant. The sergeant turned to me and said they had spoken with James again, and he was adamant that he had dropped off the kids around 4 p.m. the previous day. According to his timeline, they should have been on my porch when I returned, and the implication was obvious. They thought I had taken them in and then done something with them. The thought alone made my skin crawl. I was furious but trying to stay composed. I showed them my gas receipts, time-stamped Instagram stories, even texts with friends proving I had been hours away from Macon all of Friday and well into Saturday morning. They skimmed the screenshots but remained hesitant. Then they brought up the children again, said they were still searching, that this was now a serious missing persons case, and they needed me to be honest. I nearly snapped. I had done nothing but tell the truth since the moment my brother knocked on my door like a lunatic. It was not until my lawyer returned with a printout of the neighborhood map that things finally shifted. She pointed out the nearby traffic poles that had mounted surveillance cameras, city-installed and motion-activated. There were 3 of them within a 1-block radius of my house. If my brother had pulled up in his van and dropped the kids off at any time, those cameras would have caught him. The police decided to humor us and requested the footage. I sat silently in that metal chair for another hour while they pulled the data from the Department of Transportation. Every minute that passed added another layer of ice to my spine. What if the footage was grainy? What if he had parked in a blind spot? What if the kids had wandered off before the cameras caught anything? The what-ifs buzzed like wasps in my mind. I hated that I was now hoping for proof of something awful, just to clear my name. Then the sergeant walked back in, holding a printed sequence of stills from the footage. His expression had changed. This time, it was not suspicion in his eyes. It was shock. They had reviewed the cameras, every frame from 3:30 to 5 p.m. on Friday. My brother's van never appeared. No car resembling his ever drove past. There were no children walking, running, or sitting near my porch. No one had been dropped off. There was zero evidence of any child being in that area during that window of time. Nothing. It was empty. I had been telling the truth the entire time. They had even cross-checked the license plates of all vehicles within the vicinity and confirmed that not a single one matched my brother's. The sergeant stared at me, his face suddenly weighed down with realization. My brother had lied. Boldly. Deliberately. He had painted me as the villain in a story he wrote himself, thinking no one would check the details. Meanwhile, search teams had been deployed across Macon, combing through parks, alleys, and nearby neighborhoods looking for his children. Officers had been diverted, an Amber Alert was moments away from being issued, and a completely innocent person, me, had been hours from being charged with child negligence because my brother could not handle his responsibilities and wanted someone else to absorb the damage. The room shifted. The tone softened. They asked me to stay while they continued the investigation, this time treating me less like a criminal and more like a witness. I was too exhausted to respond with anything more than a nod. I felt hollow. I had spent the last 6 hours under fluorescent lights being blamed for something that never happened, simply because my brother decided I was disposable. As the station started buzzing with renewed activity and fresh orders, I caught a glimpse of the senior officer walking past with his phone pressed to his ear, repeating one phrase I will never forget. She was telling the truth. He fabricated the whole thing. The words sounded distant, surreal, like I was watching them in a film instead of living them. But I had proven it. I had been gaslit, accused, and nearly criminalized for something I did not even know had occurred, but I stood my ground. The truth had clawed its way out of the cameras on the street, and the police, Those same people who doubted me just hours earlier now stared at the footage with stunned expressions and shame in their eyes. Update 2. I was still at the police station when the call came in. The officer who had just hours ago grilled me like a suspect burst back into the room with a stunned look plastered across his face. His voice carried the weight of disbelief as he announced that the children had been found. The air shifted instantly. Every officer within earshot paused what they were doing, the tension cracking like ice as news spread across the department. The kids were alive, unharmed, and safe, and the most unbelievable part of all, they had been with my own mother. My heart nearly gave out. Relief crashed into me like a wave, but it was laced with confusion, and under that confusion burned a familiar rage. I was escorted into a quiet room, where a detective calmly explained what they had pieced together from the phone call with my mother. According to her, she had been driving through town the previous afternoon. She said she was running errands and thought she would stop by my house to drop off a box of old family photos she had been meaning to return to me. She pulled up to my curb around 5 and immediately spotted 2 small figures sitting on the edge of my front steps, her grandchildren. She was stunned. She said they looked tired, confused, and were carrying small backpacks and nothing else. She got out of her car and asked them what they were doing there. They told her that their father had dropped them off and told them to wait for me. But my porch was dark, the house was silent, and there were no signs of life inside. That was when it hit her. She realized something was terribly wrong. So she loaded the kids into her car and drove straight back to her place, never calling me, never calling the police, never calling anyone. She said she had no idea there would be such a huge fallout that she figured she would wait until she saw my brother the next day to get the full story. Her explanation was laced with shame, but she insisted that when she saw how small and scared the kids looked, her only instinct was to get them out of the cold. She repeated this story to the officers at the precinct when they picked her up to verify everything. She even showed them the timestamps on her car's dash cam, placing her at my house just after 5 o'clock on Friday. The children confirmed her version. One of them even remembered the color of a neighbor's mailbox, something the police cross-verified immediately. It all lined up. Every word of her story checked out. My brothers did not. The moment this came to light, the energy in the station turned electric. What had started as a slow descent into false accusations and legal trauma was now boiling into something else. Accountability. My brother had lied. Not just a desperate half-truth or an omission. He had deliberately fabricated a scenario, reported his own children missing, and framed me as the negligent party. And when the truth came out, he did not fold. He doubled down. He cried. He insisted that he had told someone, that he had called me, that he had knocked. He threw everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. But it was over. The truth had bulldozed through every one of his lies. The officers returned to my home to confront him, where he was still sitting on my porch, pretending to be worried, checking his phone, pacing like a man who had lost control of a situation he thought he could manipulate. They told him the children had been found, and were safe. They told him his mother had them. And then, without flinching, they told him he was under arrest. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. He did not even try to argue. He stood there, stunned into silence as the cuffs went around his wrists. The neighbors gathered on their porches as the squad car pulled away. Some whispered, some pointed, but no one said a word to me. I stood in my doorway, arms crossed, chest tight with the weight of everything I had just endured. Hours ago, I had been defending myself against accusations that threatened to shatter my life. Now I was watching my own brother disappear into the back of a cruiser because he had tried to make me the villain in a story he wrote out of laziness and cowardice. The aftermath was a strange cocktail of emotions. Relief that the children were safe. Gratitude that my mother, even in her obliviousness, had done the right thing, and a quiet, simmering rage that my brother had been willing to destroy me just to cover up his own failures. The police issued a statement clearing me of all wrongdoing. My name was officially removed from the report. They even offered a public apology at a neighborhood community board meeting acknowledging the mistake. But the scars were still fresh. Everyone kept saying how lucky we were that my mother found the children, that it could have gone so much worse, that they were unharmed and back in safe hands. But behind every smile, behind every pat on the back, was the stunned silence at what James had done. His own mother had stumbled upon his abandoned children. He had never called her, never followed up, never tried to retrieve them. He had spent his energy crafting a lie convincing enough to get me arrested, and he would have succeeded if not for a camera on a traffic pole and a mother's unexpected visit. No one expected it from him, but now everyone knew, and no one would forget. Update 3. The fallout was brutal. After the footage was reviewed, the children were confirmed safe, and the lie had unraveled entirely. The state stepped in swiftly. Child Protective Services launched a full investigation into my brother's actions. What they uncovered painted a devastating picture, not just of that single weekend, but of a pattern of reckless, neglectful behavior stretching back nearly a year. Missed school pickups, unexplained absences, children dropped off with random neighbors, all hidden behind a curtain of convenience and deception. That single act of dumping them on my porch and then lying about it was just the surface of something far deeper. His wife, Elena, had remained quiet through most of the ordeal. She had been out of town herself that weekend, visiting her sister in Chattanooga. She returned to find her husband in county custody and her children traumatized but thankfully safe at their grandmother's house. At first, she refused to speak to anyone. She stayed silent through the hearings and interviews, kept her voice even and her expression unreadable. But I saw the fracture the moment she stepped into the family court hearing that decided the future of their children. She sat behind the state's attorney with her arms folded across her chest, not once acknowledging James. And when the hearing ended with the judge announcing that James was being stripped of his parental rights due to extreme negligence, endangerment, and deliberate falsification of police reports, she did not shed a tear. She stood, walked out, and did not look back. Later that evening, while James was being processed and served a temporary restraining order, Elena packed his things and left them on the front lawn of the house they once shared. It was not even subtle. His name scrawled in marker across boxes, clothing tumbling from open flaps, his guitar case left on the grass, half-zipped. She did not need to shout. Her message was written in silence. He was no longer welcome. The part that burned deepest was how James handled the fallout. He refused to see the chain of events for what it was. He would not admit what he had done, not to the court, not to his wife, not even to himself. He continued spinning his fantasy version of the story, telling anyone who would listen that I had orchestrated it all, that I had manipulated the footage, that the kids had been taken by someone else, and I had used it to turn everyone against him. At first, I was afraid someone might believe him. He was persuasive when he wanted to be, charismatic in short doses, the kind of person who could play the victim convincingly if you had never seen what lay beneath the surface. But it only took 1 or 2 attempts before people stopped listening. Our extended family, his old friends, even a few of his co-workers, everyone had seen the reports. They knew the timeline. They knew my mother's account. They had seen the footage from the traffic camera. No one bought into his delusions. He became a ghost in his own story. No wife, no children, no one left to lie to. He drifted from job to job for a while, picking fights on Facebook and telling strangers how his own sister ruined his life. But I did not ruin anything. I simply told the truth. The ruin was his to own. Elena filed for divorce a month after the court ruling. She moved across town and changed her number. The kids stayed with her full time, now under a new agreement that barred James from all contact, both direct and indirect. She enrolled them in therapy, changed their school, and did everything she could to erase the trail that had led to that disastrous weekend. As for me, I stayed quiet. I refused to engage with James again. I did not answer his calls, ignored his online rants, and deleted the occasional email filled with half-apologies and accusations. I had learned that defending yourself against someone determined to rewrite history is a waste of breath. Let them scream into the void. Let them blame the sky for the rain. The truth had already spoken, loud and clear, and this time everyone had listened.